I have Sour Patch Kids today because, fuck, I can't open it. Because I'm feeling sour, honestly. Just a little heads up, I live in a home with multiple animals and other people. So if you hear noises around, it's normal, it's background noise, it's my life, whatever. So today's video is, I was going to film something else, but I decided that I needed to film this. I'm not even gonna read out of my Encyclopedia of Spirits because I don't know how long this video is gonna be, but we're gonna dedicate it only to this. And if you saw the title, then you know that this is kind of a rant about the Poppy War trilogy. I only own the first book because I want to give away on Instagram or something, and the person picked this off my Amazon wishlist. So I have the first book, and I recently, and by recent I mean just this morning, finished reading the third book, so I ended up borrowing the second and third book from my library, which is why you've got library code stuff on it. But yes, I finished it this morning, and boy do I have things to say. But let's just get into the basics of this trilogy. So the first book, this one came out in 2018, and the second book came out in 2019, and the third book came out in 2020. So they each came out like 1 year apart. And this is the debut series of R.F. Kuang. And what I'll say is that I kept hearing about it. I kept saying people that these books were amazing and that there's nothing out there like these. So, you know, obviously I was drawn in by the hype and I was like, well, all right, I'm gonna go ahead and get right into these, right? The basic gist is that, and this is without any spoilers, you follow your main character, Rin. Her full name is like Runin something, whatever, it doesn't matter. She's called Rin throughout the books. But she is an orphan. She doesn't really know where she's really from, but she's raised by this family who they live in Tikani, which is it's a town that's really down south here. Maybe I'll find a map online and be able to do this, but you do have a whole map, and she lives like down here. She's in the Rooster province. It's down south, and this country is called Nikara, probably butchering that. But she lives in poverty, and she hates her foster family because they're assholes. So she's like, I want to go to Sinigard. Sinigard is all the way up here. Yeah, up there. And that is where it's a school. It's a very renowned school in Sinigard, which trains like generals and soldiers and whatever, but you have to pass a test. So she passes the test and she goes to Sinigard, and from there she learns a lot about like the politics and about the country too. Like she realizes that up north there's a whole different dialect of speech, like a different accent, and she's looked down on, and she deals with a lot of bullying and oppression and things like that. And I mean, it gets worse because these books they're military fantasy. So she also learns about, this is the fantasy side of things, is shamans. So in this world, there are people who can connect with the gods that kind of rule their universe or whatever. And the gods they're like energy. They just are what they are. They're not good or evil. But when you are a shaman, when you have a connection with them, you run the risk of potentially losing your body to the god. It might take over, and when it does, at that point, you can no longer die, and you're lost, basically. So she learns about that. And really, all you really need to know about these books, without any spoilers, is that they make very strong connections with history as we know it. So I mean, the more I read it, the more that it became pretty obvious that, here, I'll show you the map again, Nikara, right, this whole country here, is basically China. The Federation of Mugen is Japan, and I don't know, maybe Spear is like the Philippines or something, I don't know. And then there's a whole other country, which is not on the map, but that's basically Europe, right? And so the wars and the things that happen in these books are parallels to our real history. And there are things that happen in the first book that I will mention in the spoiler part. And again, that's like me just trying to stay very vague because I have a tendency to sputter things that will spoil. So now I'll just kind of talk about my thoughts. Why is this more of a rant than it is a rave? If you know me, and you like follow my Instagram or even have seen some of my wrap-ups, The Poppy War came out to be like a 3.75 read or something like that. The Dragon Republic was around the same. But I recently finished The Burning God, and this one came out as a 2-star. And I got about 400 pages into this one, and for the rest of it, I was like skimming. Oh my gosh, I can't do this anymore. I was skimming. I was just like really skimming the pages to get the basics of what was happening, just so that I could get to the end, just so that I could say, I finished this book. I finished this trilogy, and I'm done with it. Not to say that I hated these books. I'm glad I read them. I feel like I can now say, okay, I've read one of the big trilogies that everyone talks about, but I don't understand the hype. I can understand why people think that this trilogy is so impactful. It's very gory, and it will hit on things that are brutal. Like, it talks about cannibalism, it talks about rape. It has so many, honestly, read the trigger warnings before you read this. If you are a sensitive person, I do not recommend that you pick it up. It's brutal, and it never lets up. It's war, 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 all the time. So I understand that from that perspective, maybe these books were that's what made them so amazing. Also, on top of that, like, it is an Asian-inspired fantasy. Now, I don't really know when diversity in fantasy started really booming and people started paying more attention to it, but I do feel like probably that is one of the main reasons why it's so hyped, is that everyone was very used to like a Western-inspired fantasy, and now this trilogy comes out and it's so gruesome and it's so real almost, because again, it pulls from real history, and so it just hits a little closer to home. So I feel like a lot of the hype around it is that, oh, it's an Asian perspective on real history, but given a fantasy twist with some magical elements. But, like, I don't know. I think Lorena, I was speaking with Lorena, who's at Lore Book Dreamer on Instagram, and she put it in really good words. She said that the praise for this series, it's almost like praising it just for the sake of praising diversity. And again, I'm not saying that that's only it, because obviously these books came out 2018. There's been diverse fantasy since then, I should hope. I don't know. I'm not that big of a fantasy reader. I don't keep track of it. I don't really keep track of how many diverse reads I do either. I just am attracted to what I like. But I do feel like that's probably a part of why these books are so hyped up. Because ultimately, I don't think these books are that great. I think that they lack in... what's the word? God damn it, I'm losing it. I'm fucking losing it. These books are driving me crazy. Pacing. It struggles with pacing so much. So, without really spoiling anything, the first book, a large part of it, like a good, I don't know, almost like half of the book is extremely slow, and it's just Rin going to this school and doing these things at this school, and most of that doesn't even matter for the rest of the trilogy. So it was really rough, because then at the halfway point, all of a sudden it's like war, and then from there it's just constant battles and constant struggles, and you don't really get a second to breathe, and especially you don't get that really important in-between stuff. The stuff that kind of, it doesn't necessarily have to build the plot or move the plot along, but it helps you connect, right? And I feel like these books lack in that. I never cared for Rin. I never cared for a lot of the other characters, even though I wanted to. Like, Kite, her friend, her best friend. I didn't really care that much about him. I was like, I mean, I care about him a little more than her, because at least he's not a total asshole, but, like, I don't care that much. And then Naja and her relationship with him, sort of, I guess. I don't really know. I didn't really care. Like, there were so many things that I didn't care about, because this book didn't really spend a lot of time on the pacing of it. And even sometimes things happened in a battle or that affected a battle, but it went by so quick, and like, it just kind of, it almost feels like it tumbled down a hill and it was like, ta-da, I stuck the landing. And I'm like, but what the fuck happened? What happened when you fell right there? Like, what was the tumbling? So that probably was the biggest issue that I had. On top of that, there were just some loopholes here and there, and I'll get into that in the spoilery section. But yeah, this trilogy, I gotta say, if you are very much into military fantasy and you really like your stuff to hit closer to home and have a lot of historical significance, then maybe you'll really love it. And honestly, the writing isn't bad. I have a lot of issues with the pacing and also the magical aspect that is in this book. It has very little impact on the story. You okay? Okay. Sometimes it didn't even feel like I was really reading a fantasy book. It felt like I was reading more of like a made-up history, like historical fiction with a little bit of magic thrown in there. All right, now I want to get into the spoilers because this is the stuff that's, yeah, this is the stuff that really enraged me. And I'm not going to do like detailed ones for every single book because there are things that bother me. In general though, these are things that happen throughout the series that I feel like ultimately by the time you get to the end, I'm like, what the fuck? So the first thing is Rin. Rin has been through a lot. I think that if you've read these books, you can agree with me. She has been through so fucking much. She has, first of all, come from a very poor family. She discovers that she's a Spearly. How? Okay, I never really feel like it was quite explained how she got from being a survivor from Spearly to somehow ending up in Nicara. Like, did she swim there? She has no memories, apparently. And I don't know, maybe I skimmed around the end of the third book and skipped something that was mentioned about how she got to Nicara, but I don't think it was ever really said. Like, she's a survivor, we know that. She's Spearly, but how physically and realistically, what happened? Did she swim? Did someone bring her there? What the fuck? So that's something that bothered me. But so, again, going back, she has been through a lot, right? So I understand that she's not a likable character. And I personally feel like she's a very well-written, dislikable character. But she is so incredibly stupid. I couldn't fucking do it at a certain point. I was like, you have been to school for a full year about war tactics, right? And then she's in war and she's experiencing things. And yet for some reason, she doesn't seem to learn from those experiences. Like she ended up, what is it? At some point, I think it's mostly in the second book or even like the end of the first book. She's essentially betrayed by Alton, right? Because, I mean, sort of. I don't know. He treated her like shit, okay? And then in the second book, she trusts Viceroy, who he's like, I need you for this war, and he betrays her. And you're like, okay, she's gonna learn from that. She's gonna learn to stand up for herself. She's gonna learn to not rely on other people as much. She could literally, I don't know. I'm just like, there could have been so many other ways. But no, third book. Oh, she trusts another guy. Oh, they betray her again. And I'm like, yeah, what else did you expect? After a while, I literally expected everything to happen the way that it did. And I knew, I was like, I'm gonna hate what happens here. And sure enough, I did. Every fucking time. It infuriated me. I couldn't fucking stand it. I was like, listen, I can deal with having a very unlikable character. Some of my favorite characters are unlikable characters. But you can't be that stupid. You can be stupid in the first 2 books, maybe the first 1.5. But then you gotta fucking learn somewhere. Anyways, she does end up going fucking crazy in the third book by the end, and I feel like that was very accurate, where she believes everyone is trying to, kill her, or everyone's trying to betray her, and I get that. Which it makes sense. Her dying at the end, thank fucking gods, because, oh my gosh, that needed to happen. Alright, I'm in the middle of editing, and I realized that I said that I would mention the thing that happens in the first book that's related to history, and I totally forgot to mention it. And it's what is it called again? The Nanjing Massacre. I hope I'm saying that right. Or it's also known as the Rape of Nanjing. And this piece of history, our real history, so it was the mass murder of Chinese civilians in Nanjing, capital of the Republic of China, immediately after the Battle of Nanking in the Second Sino-Japanese War by the Imperial Japanese Army. So, again, this is what I mean by, like, parallels being drawn in these books with our real history, where in the first book, there's essentially, Nicara and the Muganese Federation or whatever. What happens in Golan Nis, that massacre is based off of the real massacre of Nanjing, also known as the Rape of Nanjing. So, just to kind of show that these books were heavily inspired with true events. And that's probably why it is so disturbing to many readers. But really all you need to do is pick up a history book if you want this kind of literature. Now I want to talk about the loopholes. And these are the ones that just especially bothered me. Yuna might start playing with a toy. If you hear that, I'm so sorry. So, I particularly was bothered by the magical loopholes. Throughout the books, you learn about the trifecta, right? Daji, who's the temptress or whatever, Jiang, who is the gatekeeper, and Riga, the one who apparently died 20 years ago, and he's the Red Emperor, whatever, right? The trifecta. Big-ass badasses who won wars and have been living for hundreds of years. Like, they're immortal, right? Because they are one with their gods. It's literally what we were told, is that once you lose control of your body and the god takes over your body, you are immortal. You can't fucking be killed, right? And we learned about that in the first Poppy War when they let out the wind guy, who he had no fucking importance. What the fuck? Like, he literally just popped up in book 2 and then died, and there was nothing else with that. I was like, I feel like there could have been a little more on that end. Anyways, point is, and then even Najah, we learned that he has a god with him, and that felt kind of random, where it was like, oh yeah, no, actually I can't die either because I have a god in me. But for some fucking reason, right, like, you are one with your god. You can't die. In the third book, the trifecta are reunited at the top of the fucking Tianxi mountain or whatever it was fucking called. I might be saying that wrong. And they were like, yeah, we're gonna awaken Riga so that we can fight the Hesperians because, you know, they're colonizing our country. And it's okay, with the 3 of us together, we will vanquish them. They get to the top of the mountain, and Rin meets Riga, and she's like, oh wow, he really is a racist. I'm like, yeah, he wiped out your people because he thought they were inferior. What the fuck did you expect? So she finally discovers that, and she's like, oh yeah, I guess I should kill him now, right? But he's big badass Riga, and she's struggling. And then somehow it all lines up perfectly, where the fucking Hesperians and their dirigibles come in, and they just blow each other up. And that's it. And I was like, hold on. I thought that these gods couldn't be killed. I thought that the only way to get rid of them is to put them in the Chukolik mountain, or whatever the fuck it's called. I don't know how to fucking pronounce that shit. What is it? The Kuluj, whatever. It's not even on here. The Chulu Korik. I'm gonna call it that because I don't know what else to call it. I thought that was the only way to get rid of the gods, is to trap them in there. But apparently no, you can just blow each other up. And then Rin also dies just to a knife stabbed into her heart. For me, it's the when do they die and when do they not die? Like, how is it that Najah could survive drowning and being stabbed, apparently? And also, like, apparently you heal from all your wounds, but why does Najah have a scar on his face? Wouldn't that have healed too? I feel like there was a lack of coherence there, and that frustrated me. So yeah, those were probably the main things that bothered me, and those are the things that I wanted to rant here in this video, and I'm done. I'm very happy that I finished this trilogy. I'm glad that I was able to experience it, and to be able to say, you know, I read it, and I understand why it is so praised, why it is so hyped, but I don't agree. And that's it. That's really it. I think that if it was rewritten, yeah, I don't know, revised or something, I would probably like it a lot more, but I just had some issues. I totally forgot about my Sour Patch Kids. Let me know if you have read this trilogy before. Do you absolutely love it? Do you agree with maybe some of the loopholes that I talked about, the plot holes? I don't know, like, I feel like it's so widely hyped that everyone's gonna be like, you just don't understand. I'm like, I do. I understand that it is a parallel between our history, and I understand that it is so brutal, and that it's just, you know, because I said, like, oh, it's war, and it never lets up. Well, that's what reality is like. I get that, but you're still writing a book. You still have to make me invested in the characters and in what you're building. And also, like, just don't decide that suddenly, oh, well, they were immortal, but now they can actually die to all these explosions instead of having to be locked up in a mountain. Like, I don't know, that just really bothered me. So please, let me know what you think. Do you agree? Do you disagree with me? So with that, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.